A pleasant day to you, sir, and to anyone currently watching this video. We are the members of Group 8, and we're here to present to you a handful of concepts made by Ludwig Wittgenstein from his book Philosophical Investigations. But before we begin this presentation, I believe that some background is needed as to who Ludwig Wittgenstein really is. Ludwig Wittgenstein was an Austrian-British philosopher that was born in 1889. He was born into a wealthy family in Austria, took a great interest in the fields of language and logic, which led him to study in Cambridge. Wittgenstein is best known for his works, Tractatus Logica Philosophicus, published in 1921, and later followed by Philosophical Investigations in 1953. These books tackle various concepts and how language came to be, and analyzes the process we use to communicate different ideas with one another. That being said, Philosophical Investigations is a book solely focused on explaining how every word has meaning. Meaning in the sense that we can associate words with a certain object or action. For example, if I mention the word school, you'd associate this word as a place where students gather to learn and study. If I mention the word chef, you would think to yourself of someone who works at a restaurant and gets paid for cooking various meals. But have you ever thought to yourself as to how we've come to develop an understanding of what these words mean? Wittgenstein has, and he explains that we learn the meaning of words repetition, wherein the more you repeatedly hear words used in their proper places within various sentences, the more we come to gradually understand what these words signify. Think about it. Around the time we were infants, we could barely speak or understand what most words mean. But the more and more our parents or any of the people around us speak, we learn all kinds of words. We learn where these words are specifically used in, and eventually piece out what kind of meaning they have because of us hearing them being said over and over again. Now, I'm sure that some of us here remember our parents telling us that when we were an infant, the first words we learned to speak were either dada or mama. This is probably because we repeatedly heard our parents telling us something like, I'm daddy, or I'm mommy. And even if they don't do this, they usually refer to themselves as these names whenever they try and get the attention of one another. For example, they would say something along the lines of, Hey dad, can you grab David's milk? Or what about, Hey mom, I think Hilda needs a diaper change. As a result of the number of times they use these names to communicate with each other, we as infants learn to use our mouth to speak these words, thus allowing us to call for their attention and express what we want. This is what is referred to as a complete primitive language. Moving on, we come to understand what words mean whenever someone with more knowledge, such as a teacher, points at a specific object to direct our attention, and at the same time utters a word to refer to that object. Let's say a child is browsing a supermarket with their mother. They're out shopping by the fruit aisle, and this child is unfamiliar with the various fruits at display. In order to help the child understand, the mother points at various fruits while telling them what they're called. She points to the red, brown-shaped fruit and refers to them as apples. She then points to the yellow, crescent-shaped fruit and tells them those are called bananas. She does the same thing for all the fruits in those aisles, until the child can understand what all those fruits are called. This process is regarded as language games, or as an ostensive teaching of words that can help us establish an association between a specific word and thing. Whenever we hear a word we're already familiar with, we can easily visualize a picture of that object in our mind. So, if I say the word car, you would associate this word with an image of a vehicle with four wheels that is used to be driven on a road. If I say the word bottle, you'd imagine something made out of either plastic or glass that is used to store liquids. Despite not being able to see these objects physically, we have no trouble conjuring up an image of that object in our minds due to the fact that we've already associated certain words for these objects. We can also further expand our use of language by using the words there and this. Adding on to what was previously said, we can use these words together to signify a location when pointing at a specific direction. To give an example, if someone were to ask me where the restroom is, I could direct them to it by pointing somewhere and telling them the restroom is over there. If you were to take an exam, a teacher could point at an unoccupied space and say, leave your belongings there. The use of these words isn't restricted to simply just pointing at something. If I say something like, this coffee is too bitter, then it would refer to the coffee I just consumed. If I tell my friend, this is where I go to school, it would mean that I'm referring to the building we just walked by. Repetition in the process of associating words with images wouldn't be nearly as effective if we're unable to understand the application of words. Despite knowing that every word in language signifies something, we wouldn't be able to understand the significance of these words if we aren't able to make a proper distinction between them. Think of the tools inside a toolbox. If I say the word hammer, you would think to yourself that this tool is used for modifying the position of nails. When I say the word saw, I'm referring to a tool that is used for cutting through wood or other materials. To give a few more examples, let me relate this concept to us students and educators. Whenever we hear Microsoft Word, we think of a program used for writing and editing documents. When Google Meet is mentioned, we know that this is a platform used for conducting online meetings. Through this, we can see that by naming or coming up with a word for something, we attach a label to that object. A label in our minds to know what that word is used for and thus be able to distinguish it from other words. When communicating with one another, the tone of voice and the way we utter our words plays a crucial role into what kind of message we wish to convey, as these factors can influence whether we intend to declare a statement, ask a question, express an emotion, and many other uses. Let's take a look at the statement, "It's raining." The only message I'm trying to convey is that it's simply raining. But what if I were to change the tone as to how I say it? If I instead told you that it's raining, it would mean I'm unsure as to whether or not it's actually raining, and I'm awaiting confirmation. By uttering, "It's raining!" it means that I'm in a state of panic, as having the weather be rainy proves quite troublesome for me in this instance. These conditions aren't limited to the way we communicate audibly, as these could also apply for how we write our messages, as the punctuations we use play a similar role in expressing our ideas. We use a period to mark the end of a sentence. We use question marks to present a question. We use exclamation marks to express a statement with a strong feeling or emphasis. And the list goes on, but what I'm trying to say is that there's a multiplicity of ways we can use to communicate with our language.
Uniformity of words. In language, there exists uniformity, where certain words look entirely similar but have different meanings. They have the same spelling and pronunciation, but once put into a specific context, you realize that they have completely different uses. This is commonly referred to as homonyms. In Ludwig's work, he actually uses the symbolism of levers of a locomotive, where they may look the same, they do different things. Going back to more practical examples, several homonyms are widely used in daily conversation. For example, the word bat can be used to refer to an object used to hit a baseball, but it can also mean the flying mammal. This emphasizes the idea that words that look the same differ once their application is presented to us. The importance of specifics. When engaging in conversation, merely saying a statement and making a claim and not explaining it further makes the claim lose its meaning, unless we have a specific reason or a context for why we say that statement. For example, the statement "everyone is equal" is a fact and can be understood by everyone. But saying it alone without adding something onto it makes it lose its meaning, as it does not give any new information to the listener, unless you add something with it like the context of rights or privileges. Evasion of generalization. When making a statement, we tend to use words that affect the whole scope of what we are talking about and lead us into making wrong statements. It is common in conversations that we tend to make a hasty generalization with words when we discover something. When looking at the surface level of a fact and it shows that everything checks out, we tend to avoid looking into the claim deeper, and this results in us making statements that are half true. This convenience of just considering everything in the claim is true because of some examples is a problem that is prevalent among speakers. Take the statement, "all cleaning supplies clean the room." While this is true for some cleaning supplies, such as brooms, which physically remove dirt from the floor, the same cannot be said for air fresheners, which only affects the fragrance of the room. Here we can see that the word "clean" cannot be used in both cases, as it is only applicable to supplies that physically remove dirt. This creates a habit of wrong generalization. Naming is equal to labeling. It is not uncommon in our lives that we name something, whether living or non-living, animate or inanimate, real or imaginary. Once we give a name to something, it is like adding an imaginary label to that specific thing. Then, when someone speaks or hears about a certain name, an image pops up to a person's head because they have attached that name into that specific thing. Several examples of this idea exist in daily life. Take an example of naming your pets. When you name your dog Rex, that dog will not respond whenever you say their name because you associated the name Rex to that specific dog. And whenever someone who knows Rex hears his name, they will instantly think that we're talking about the dog. Another is the names of the rooms in your house. While the bathroom does not physically have a sign that says bathroom, it is widely known in your household that the room with a toilet and a shower is called the bathroom. Instruments of language. There are several times in daily life where we converse without using words. Instead, we provide a visual sample of what we want to say or use gestures to show what we want to say. Even though we do not vocally express these things, we are still able to convey what we want to communicate to the other person. That is why samples and gestures are instruments of language just as words are. Take the situation of painting a house. When a painter asks another painter on what color of paint they will use in a specific room, and that painter points to a can of white paint, then that other painter instantly understands that white paint will be used to color the room. Another example is when a mother asks her son if he has school tomorrow and the son shakes his head, the mother instantly understands that her son has no classes the next day. Grouping based on commonalities. When we group words into kinds, we tend to prefer an output that makes it convenient for us to differentiate them properly. We do not randomly separate these words into groups, but instead we try to find a commonality between them to help us understand the groupings more. Generally, words are grouped based on their application and our own inclination. There are several examples of groupings of words based on their application and similarities. One example is the classification of instruments, where they are grouped based on how they produce sounds. Stringed instruments make sound by vibrating the strings, wind instruments use air to produce sounds, and much more. A simpler example would be classifying transportation vehicles. In the context of traveling, classifying different kinds of transportation into land, air, and sea helps tourists know which vehicles they need to take for each mode of transportation in order to get to their destination safely. Language is like an ancient city. Language dates back since the dawn of time, and it has been through several modifications from each generation that passes. And to this day, it still gets changed continuously. As such, it is similar to an ancient city. It has existed for quite some time now, and it is composed of new and old terms similar to a city with preserved buildings and modern structures. It contains additional parts, such as scientific notations, such as a city has additional structures to cater for its citizens. It continues to change for the future while still remembering the past. An ancient city still remains to be the best metaphor for a language as it has traits similar to language. The sheer size of knowledge regarding language is only comparable to scale with a city. The fact that it has also been around for quite some time and will still continue to evolve fits the description of the city perfectly. Elliptical sentences. In some cases in our day-to-day activities, we tend to experience tense moments, moments of fear, alertness, and struggle. In turn, the way we speak to people differs too in accordance with the situation. When we feel anger, we tend to talk less but in more of a loud tone. When we are in a hurry, we tend to use terms that make us convey information as fast as possible. Whatever modifications we make in words according to the situation, the human mind is able to comprehend it regardless. These are called elliptical sentences. Take for an example, a situation where you help your dad fix your car. When you have been doing that task for a considerable amount of time, tension is created and the patience of your dad can wear thin. In this case, he might exclaim the word, light. Even if he only said one word, your mind instantly thinks that your dad wants you to point the light to where he is working. Notice how he didn't have to say the full sentence of point the light, as he understands that saying light is enough to let you know what he needs. Mastery for understanding. Some statements that we make are only valid for a specific locale or minority. This is common with statements tied with dialect or specific cultural and geographical context. Because of this, those foreign to that specific group of people or idea may not interpret a statement the same way those who are used to it do. This may lead to misunderstandings and disagreements among speakers with this context. One local example I remember with this situation is the statement, "Nakain ka na ba?" While the common Filipino would probably freak out or wonder if this means that the person asking this question is wondering if you've literally been eaten, the locals who say this sentence on a daily basis will understand it as a question if a person has eaten or not. Basically, it is a local iteration of the same sentence, "Kumain ka na ba?" And if a person not familiar with this fact hears the question, "Nakain ka na ba?" it will create misunderstandings and confusion. Language is flexible. In sentence construction, we sometimes make statements that do not mean their literal structure. To elaborate, in language, the tone and structure of a sentence will not always match its intended use. There are statements that we say in an asking tone that expresses our opinion rather than attempting to get an answer. In language, context and application also matter in understanding what others say. A statement can go from a question or a command by either only modifying the words or the addition of a question mark, and sometimes both. For example, in purchasing something and a form is involved, the signature of the customer is needed to complete the transaction. The salesperson would then have different options to say that the customer needs to sign the form. He can just directly say, sign this form, which indicates a straight command, or he can change it up and say, would you please sign this form? Still making it as a command, but posing it as a question in order to be more respectful to the customer. We can see here that statements can be modified according to context and still mean the same thing, and that sentences are not solely to be taken literally. The beauty of language is that it does not adhere to a singular strict and formal approach. In making statements, you are free to modify your sentence according to the context. You can use different signs such as exclamation points and question marks in order to change the type of sentence you want to convey, and that this is supported by the fact that humans are able to distinguish between different types of sentences. The fact that language allows the modification of sentences is a huge help in our daily life. It does not force us to follow a strict format, and it gives us the freedom to convey our thoughts the best way for any given situation. On the other hand, it is important to know that this privilege does not come without the risk of being misunderstood. Even if we are provided with multiple ways to express our thoughts, it is still vital to consider how others perceive them.
Family resemblances. Wittgenstein's metaphor for explaining how ideas are connected, not by a common core but by overlapping similarities. Concepts may share certain features without all possessing the same fundamental quality, highlighting the flexible and interconnected nature of meaning. For example, consider the concept of games, such as badminton, basketball, volleyball, and many more. They all don't have a common element, but they share various similarities, such as rules, competitions, and playfulness. These overlapping characteristics create a network of relations among them, which Wittgenstein refers to as a family resemblance. This idea challenges the notion that concepts have firm, fixed definitions. Instead, meaning is seen as flexible and interrelated, reflecting how our understanding of concepts can shift based on their use and context. Next is the undefined boundaries of ideas or concepts. This concept suggests that many ideas do not have clear-cut boundaries and can be used in various contexts. For example, words like game or justice have no fixed definitions but are identified by overlapping characteristics, challenging the idea of rigid, unchanging meanings. Take game as an example. What makes something a game might vary widely. Some games involve physical activity, others involve mental strategy, and some might be played alone or with others. These variations show that the boundaries of the concept of game are not sharply defined but are instead context dependent. This perspective challenges the traditional view that concepts should have clear and unchanging meanings. Next is the importance of context. Wittgenstein emphasizes that the meaning of language is shaped not just by the words themselves, but the context in which they are used. Social, cultural, and historical contexts influence meaning, challenging the view that language is purely representational or logical. For example, the word justice might be understood differently in a legal setting compared to a moral or social context. In the court of law, justice might focus on legal fairness and procedural correctness, while in a social context, it might involve broader considerations of different equity and morality. This highlights that meaning is not just a matter of internal structure, but also of external context, questioning the idea that language is merely a logical or a representational system. Next is the diversity of language. Wittgenstein asserts that language is a versatile tool used in various ways depending on the situation and purpose. There is no single correct way to use language, challenging the notion of a universal grammar or set of rules governing all language use. For instance, the way we use language in everyday conversation can differ significantly from the language used in different fields, such as legal, scientific, or technical context. Each context shapes the way we employ language, demonstrating that there is no single correct way to use it. Next is the limitations of definition. Wittgenstein questions the traditional approach of giving concepts precise definitions, arguing that many ideas lack clear definitions. Instead, they are characterized by common features that vary depending on context, challenging the idea that concepts can be fully and accurately defined. For example, while we might not be able to pin down a strict definition of what constitutes a game, we can recognize it through examples and shared characteristics. This approach questions the idea that concepts can be completely and accurately defined through a specific criteria. Next is the limitation of rules. Wittgenstein suggests that rules are not always strict and can be applied differently depending on the situation. Language is governed by customs and practices that can vary, challenging the idea that language is a rigid system controlled by fixed rules and highlighting its dynamic and evolving nature. For example, the rules for using formal language in a professional setting might differ from those in informal conversations among friends and colleagues. This variability challenges the idea that language is governed solely by a fixed set of rules and emphasizes the importance of understanding it as a dynamic, evolving phenomenon. And lastly, the role of having examples. Wittgenstein argues that examples are often more effective than abstract explanations in conveying the meaning of a concept. By looking at specific instances, we can better understand how a concept is used, challenging the idea that concepts are best understood through theoretical definitions. For instance, to understand what a game is, we might look at different games such as basketball, volleyball, or other physical sports, or we can also include chess, Monopoly, or other board games, and different video games. These examples illustrate the concept's application and reveal its diverse aspects, rather than relying solely on a theoretical definition. In conclusion, philosophical investigations by Ludwig Wittgenstein challenges the traditional notion of philosophical problems as being solvable through abstract reasoning. Instead, he suggests that philosophical issues often arise from misunderstandings about the use of language. Wittgenstein argues that by examining how language functions in everyday life, we can dissolve these confusions and clarify our concepts. His approach emphasizes the importance of context and the use of language, leading to a more descriptive and less theoretical understanding of philosophical questions. These are the references used to complete our report. And next, these are the members of our group: Brent Lawrence M. Angeles, Jose Bian F. Polintan, and yours truly, John Benedict V. Humamoy. Thank you for listening and have a great day.